For about 200 years, wealthy Europeans were genuinely terrified of the tomato. They called it the poison apple. And here is the truly unsettling part. They weren't entirely wrong.
Wait, people were actually getting sick?
Sick and sometimes dying after a perfectly nice tomato dinner. The rich would eat one and fall ill, so everyone agreed the tomato was deadly. There was just one problem with that. The tomato was completely innocent.
So what was actually killing them?
To understand the panic, you have to know where the tomato came from, because it isn't European at all. It grew wild in South America, and it was farmed for centuries in Mexico, where the Aztecs ate it happily with no drama whatsoever. Then, Spanish ships carried it back across the Atlantic in the 1500s, and Europe took one look and recoiled.
Recoiled? It's a tomato. What is so scary about a tomato?
It's family tree mostly. The tomato is a nightshade, and its cousins in that family include some genuinely nasty characters, like deadly nightshade, also called belladonna and mandrake, plants Europeans had feared for centuries. So a strange new fruit turns up looking suspiciously like the poison plants growing in the hedgerow. And it does not help that the tomato's own leaves and stems really are mildly toxic, with a sharp, rank smell when you crush them.
Okay, so guilt by association. The fruit looked like its criminal cousins.
Exactly. And then one very influential book made it official. In 1597, an English herbalist named John Gerard published a huge popular encyclopedia of plants. He described the tomato as being of rank and stinking savor and declared the whole plant poisonous. Now, gardeners in Spain and Italy were already eating tomatoes and doing perfectly fine. Gerard seems to have half known that, but his book was the authority, and so the English-speaking world believed him for the better part of 200 years.
200 years off one bad review. That is a brutal 1 star.
A brutal 1 star that stuck. The tomato became a decorative curiosity, something you grew to look at, not to eat. A little vulgar, faintly dangerous, and definitely not welcome at a refined table. But here is where it gets genuinely strange. Because remember, rich people really were getting sick. And there is a compelling explanation for why. The wealthy ate off beautiful pewter plates. And pewter, back then, contained a lot of lead.
Oh no, I think I see where this is going.
A tomato is acidic. Let that acidic juice sit on a lead-heavy plate, and it quietly pulls the lead out into the food. So the wealthy diner gets a slow dose of lead poisoning and blames the strange red fruit instead of the plate. Meanwhile, the poorer families, eating those very same tomatoes off plain wooden bowls and rough earthenware, were absolutely fine.
So the tomato got framed, the lead did it, and the tomato took the fall.
That is the heart of it. And it is such a tidy story that I want to be honest with you. Historians think the lead plate effect is real, but it was probably not the only thing going on. The fear was already baked in by the botany, the bad book, and plain snobbery. The plates just gave that fear some real victims to point at. Call it the strongest single reason people actually got hurt, not the whole answer. And while the north of Europe stayed scared, the south simply got on with dinner. Italians embraced the tomato early, and even the name they gave it was warm, pomodoro, meaning golden apple, which hints that the first ones they grew were yellow. And slowly, sauce by sauce, the tomato became the beating heart of the food we now cannot picture Italy without.
Which is wild, when a whole cuisine gets built on the one fruit everybody else was too scared to touch.
And there is one last twist, and it is my favorite. There is a famous story about how America finally got over the fear. As it goes, in 1820, a man named Robert Gibbon Johnson stood on the courthouse steps in Salem, New Jersey, and ate a whole basket of tomatoes in front of a horrified crowd who were sure he would drop dead on the spot. He didn't, and the tomato was saved.
I love that story. Please do not tell me it isn't true.
I am so sorry. Historians cannot find a single record of it from the time. The tale only really appears a century later, and it got polished up for a radio drama in the 1940s. It is almost certainly a legend.
Which is a perfect ending, honestly, because the tomato was never poison. It was the victim of a suspicious family, one grumpy book, a snobbish century, and a set of very expensive plates. And even the story of how we forgave it turns out to be mostly invented. So the next time someone swears a food is dangerous, maybe ask what it is being served on. What do we side-eye today that history will one day laugh at? Tell us down in the comments. Stay curious.
If you enjoyed that, subscribe for more and stay curious.